Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on increasing success rates for students in alternative education settings. I'm Amy Griffin. I'm the Deputy Executive Director of VAS, the Virginia Association of School Superintendents, and we're pleased to be doing a series this year with our VAS partners, our high-level VAS partners, to provide you content and examples here in Virginia of on all different content. Today's session, like I just said, is on increasing success rates in alternative education. So we're so proud to be partnering with K-12. I've got lots of little notes coming up on my computer. So if I look like I'm distracted, it's because I'm getting note takers and all that stuff,
Mhm.
all these little pop-ups. So, but welcome, and I'm going to turn it over to Suzanne Sloan from K-12 to introduce her team that's presenting with you today, and we're going to get started.
Very good. Thank you, Amy. Everybody can hear? Always like to do the check and everyone can see. Great. Well, thank you for everyone who's here live. And I know some of you will be watching this recording later because it is the Thursday before the Labor Day weekend. And I think it's probably a busy school day for everybody. And that maybe that some people thought they would be able to make it today and some things pop up on those days before holidays, I know. So I hope your school year is off to a good start. And we'd like to be able to help you with some of your planning for your students in alternative settings. And we hope that today's session will be really helpful to you and maybe for planning either into this semester, into second semester, or thinking about 2026 and doing your planning. We always at K-12 have a booth with at the VAS, Virginia Association of School Superintendents Conference. We will be there in the fall, the winter, hoping we don't have ice like we did last year in Richmond, and in the spring. So if you are listening to this today live, or if you're watching the recording, please stop over if you see our booth. There are always goodies to give out and also good information for your school division. I have the Virginia Virtual Academy team with me today and a special guest from Salem City Schools. So I think you're going to be excited to hear from Scott and Caitlin in a few minutes, and I will give you just a real quick overview of what we're talking about. So alternative settings could be anything from students who are taken out of the traditional classroom for potentially behavioral reasons. It could be for some educational reasons that are not working in the traditional classroom. It could be students who are on homebound. It could be students who are working in alternative settings because of their talents. K-12 has a partnership with an academy in Springfield, Virginia, where students are attending 5 days a week and getting their sports activities throughout the day, and also doing their work with the Virginia Virtual Academy, getting their curriculum finished, getting their instruction with their teachers. So alternative settings have all different names. Today, we're talking about mostly the hybrid setting of students coming into a building, coming into their traditional high school, and then going into an alternative setting where we come into place. The reason why we mapped it with the VTSS, and I'm going to read from that for a real quick second from the Virginia Department of Education, but I know all of you are very familiar with the Virginia tiered system of support, and I know that we all appreciate the support from the Virginia Department of Education in terms of funding. So if you're not familiar with that, or this is, you're watching for the first time, obviously you can go to the VDOE website and you can just type in VTSS and you would see an overview of what that is. The system of support just does get some funding from partners, multiple partners, and we're happy to be able to support that as well with our vast participation at K-12. But we thought we would blend this in and think of this particular set of information as something you could, for lack of a better word, copy and paste. We know that you have reports that you have to turn into the Department of Education. We know that in order to receive funding for some of your support systems, you do have to do a write-up. And so we wanted to be able to help you with some of that wording if you were choosing to use some of the K-12 products. Or you're welcome to use it if you're not using the K-12 products and you just like our wording. Amy and Cindy, thank you, Cindy Babb, and thank you, Amy Griffin, for today's setup. I know that they're going to also send this deck out and also put it somewhere where all of you are able to access it. So what we did on the first few slides here, which I absolutely will not read to you, but it takes the VTSS format, the 6 pillars, and puts in the actual description of how K-12's programming would fit in with that in terms of progress monitoring, in terms of targeted support, in terms of the universal support and targeted interventions, and then that intensive support in tier 3, which is the individualized instruction, the small group sessions, the way that we modify the curriculum, and then any accommodations, for example, read aloud testing, all of those pieces and how they would fit in with that. Our really tailored approach is, I think, what has been successful over the last 15 years that the Virginia Virtual Academy has been in operation. When we started, we had 90 students and we were partnered with one school division. We now have well over 6,300 students across the Commonwealth of Virginia participating in virtual education in a part-time or a full-time setting. And we also have students now in the alternative setting, which we've been really happy to talk about. All of our teachers are Virginia certified, and all the instruction that your students would receive, or students who are in a school division with us currently in our 21 partner school divisions, are trained to apply the evidence-based strategies and then provide that individualized support, ensuring that there's alignment between the VTSS and SS standards. So a big success piece is involving parents in traditional school. I know that's an objective every single day. Parents involved in make for a better setup for the students, and certainly the teachers enjoy working with the parents when they're partners. And that's what we do at the Virginia Virtual Academy. The students who are working in the building also have that support of Virginia Virtual Academy staff, but also the parents are involved as well, and it's really helpful. So I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin Owens and let her introduce herself and talk about the specific work that we're doing. We thought that part would be most interesting to you to know, first of all, that we're out here and that we're here to support you in many ways, but in the alternative education setting world. But also, what about give us an example of how you're doing this in one of our Virginia schools. And so Caitlin is happy to talk to you about that. And I'm really thrilled to introduce one of my favorite educators in Virginia. And I know she has a favorite educator she's going to be introducing. So, Caitlin, thank you. Talk to us about Salem City Schools and what you do.
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Caitlin Owens. I am the in-division administrator with Virginia Virtual Academy, and that means I have the pleasure of working with our existing school partners, our division partners, and helping support them with their resident students. And one way that we've been able to do that very successfully is in our existing partnership with Salem City Public Schools. And with Salem City Schools, we certainly have students who are with us in other capacities, but today we want to highlight our students in Salem City who participate in their alternative education program and how Virginia Virtual Academy has helped those students to become successful in this very unique setup that we have. And so I want to spend a little bit of time now talking to you about what that looks like, what the day-to-day looks like for those students. I came into this position about halfway through last school year, and consistently through second semester last year, we had about 20 students who were enrolled in this program through Salem City Schools. And these are students who were in 8th through 12th grade. And I think one of the biggest things to highlight about what these students do is they go to the alternative education building every single day, 5 days a week. And so they have both our very robust curriculum, our Virginia licensed teachers who are supporting them in their live classes, in their asynchronous coursework. So they have that full package. But in addition to that, they're also in person with staff at a building, and those staff are just incredible. And so when we look at what those students look like day to day, they go for 3 hours a day. And so they have their schedule set up in a morning chunk of 3 hours and an afternoon chunk of 3 hours. This has allowed them to keep their class sizes small, their teacher-student ratios small, and they are able to give ample support to the students who are there in person. I would be remiss not to mention how absolutely incredible those staff members are, and that they are a huge part of why this is successful. So having the right people on the ground, having the right wraparound supports for these students, for whatever reason, as Suzanne said, that they may be placed in this alternative education setting, These staff members know these kids. Our Virginia Virtual Academy staff know their situations. They get to know them as well. And so the level of wraparound support, not just when it comes to their academics, but all the way around, is really incredibly strong. And I would be remiss not to mention that our seniors who were enrolled in this program last spring, all of them graduated. And so we're thinking about our students who are in those alternative settings. Reaching that finish line is a huge accomplishment. So that's kind of the overview of what this looks like for them. They are getting the curriculum. Our counterpart here in just a second is going to talk a little bit more about what that looks like and how they have seen success and what works well for them. So with that being said, I am going to turn it over now to Scott Habib. Scott is the coordinator of alternative and online programs for Salem City Schools. He is boots on the ground with these kids and these staff members every day. We are so glad he agreed to come and talk about what this looks like from their perspective. So, Scott, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Caitlin. And hello, everybody. I've been kind of scrolling through the pictures at the top of the Zoom. I recognize some names and happy that you're here. And I'll just say up front, if there's anything I can do to help you guys out after this, I'll be more than happy to connect. Just a little background on my educational journey. I'm in year 29. I spent 26 years at Salem High School, the last 19 as a building level administrator, 9 as an assistant principal, 10 as a head principal. And I'm going to confess, when I was in that role, I didn't give a lot of thought to alternative ed. I'm just going to confess. I mean, I did in the fact that it was sometimes a nice place to remove a student from the building, you know? But in terms of really I think for a lot of schools, when a student goes homebound, when a student goes to alternative ed, it's natural that there's a certain element of out of sight, out of mind, because there's a bazillion things in sight to keep in mind, right? So it's very hard to be both in a building and really thinking about what goes on in an alternative setting. Now, that's not to say I had no thought about it, but one thing I noticed is that students in our alternative settings tended to sort of get tracked and stay there. We noticed that students in our alternative settings tended to not do well on state and, of course, testing. And of course, we know that if you're in an alternative setting, um, there's almost no way you're getting the same sort of robust experience that students who are with teachers, with people every day get. And so, I always knew that was out there. Even spent some time traveling around looking at some other alternative options. Went down to Kingsport, Tennessee, for example. It's something they're doing, but never really was able to do anything to make a difference. 26 years at the high school was great. 19 years as a building principal was wonderful, but it's time for something to do different. And this new role came open for us. So my role is as coordinator, you can see on the slide, but what I do is I oversee GED, homebound, home based instruction. I serve as principal for our alternative ed building, which is called AIMS. It stands for something that I always forget with the two I's, individualized something. And then I also work with Virginia Virtual. So, and we have students in our district who aren't in alternative ed who are doing Virginia Virtual. So I oversee and coordinate them and work with Caitlin. And so this put me in a whole new perspective on alternative ed because something I was right here with all of our students. You can go ahead, Suzanne, and flip that slide. And one of the things that we realized, I was blessed that when I stepped into this role, it was when we were partnering with Virginia Virtual. So I didn't have to be in the pre-Virginia Virtual era. Prior to Virginia Virtual, the nature of our alternative ed, some of your school divisions may look different, but we are a small school district. We have a few wonderful people over here, but they can't teach every single class, 8th through 12th grade, and sometimes 7th grade even. There's no way they can do all that. So we've relied on softwares in the past, various ones. We've changed some over the years, but the type of software where the whole class is already made and it's completely asynchronous, completely on your own pace. There is a time and place for that, and we still have a lot of that here. It works great if a kid is behind. We had a student move to us yesterday. They should be a junior. They have one high school credit. The Virginia Virtual is not the program for this student. So we still utilize software like that, sort of class in a can. But the end of course pass rates for those course experiences were never good, and they still aren't good. They serve a different purpose, in my opinion. And Virginia Virtual is a whole new ball game for us. So the way we kind of look at this organizationally is if a student comes to us and they're on track, so for graduation, then they are definitely going Virginia Virtual, at least for all their core classes. We might supplement some electives here and there with some classroom in a can things just for convenience sake. But they are going to be on Virginia Virtual. And it has been outstanding for us. There was definitely a learning curve. And, anytime you have a new software or a new program, everyone's got to learn how to support it. And so I would say the start of last 2 school years ago, this is my third year in the role. The start of 2 years ago was kind of bumpy. In fact, our teachers even were kind of like, can we go back to the other one? Because they just knew it, right? And it was easier. But I just knew there's no way that could be what we gave our students. They had to get something more than that. And so we pushed through. And to Caitlin's point, that the teachers make the difference, they absolutely make the difference. So both at the Virginia Virtual end and at our end. So one of the things that I've seen with Virginia Virtual is that those teachers out there who are teaching it, and I say out there because I probably never meet them, they care about kids. Just like the teachers in your buildings start to freak out when they're afraid of kids falling behind, and they're not going to be ready for the SOL test. These teachers freak out when that happens too. And it's because they're educators, they care, they love kids. And so we start getting all these emails from them. This kid's not showing up, this kid's not showing up. And sometimes we have to, and Caitlin will help with this, we have to remind them, these kids are alternative ed. They're not the traditional Virginia virtual student, from my understanding, is really more like a homeschool situation. They're staying at home. They got a mom or dad kind of helping them out. These kids, man, I wouldn't want to be in any one of their homes. Like they're coming from they have a lot of baggage and stuff. And so attendance is not always great here. And they don't do any work outside of school that they should. So Caitlin helps us schedule their classes while they're here, but that's not always 100% possible. So, but my point is, those teachers on Virginia Virtual, they're freaking out is a sign of they really care. They want these kids to do well. But likewise, here in the building, if a kid was at home doing Virginia Virtual in a traditional model, they'd have mom or dad or grandma or somebody there kind of looking after them, being the learning coach, keeping them on task. Our teachers do that. If I walk out there, probably right now, they probably have headphones in class that our kids are in the live classes, so they know what's going on. They are advocating for our students. They are pulling them aside and doing individual tutoring. They're forcing them to stay awake and watch classes and so forth. So without them, I really don't think this marriage would work this way. But with them, it's been outstanding. So I have some. I'm not really a data guy. I should be more of one, I suppose. But I did start looking at SOL scores, and so you'll see in front of you the term true VAVA. So what we mean by that is a student who's actually been in the class doing Virginia Virtual the way it's supposed to be done. And you could accuse me of massaging the data perhaps, but some folks have done Virginia Virtual, but we don't really call it true Virginia Virtual. Like they came to us at the end of April. So they were only on Virginia Virtual for a few weeks for the SOL test. I don't really put the pass or fail on Virginia Virtual. Like I don't think they really get the credit or the blame for a student in that type of situation. We have other students who, they might have been on Virginia Virtual, but they were incarcerated and in and out of school and barely were ever even here. So yes, they were on Virginia Virtual, but they were never really quite here. And so we don't call that true Virginia Virtual. So 2024 in the spring, we noticed something, that if you're on true Virginia Virtual alternative ed, you didn't have a very good pass rate, but it was a lot higher than if you weren't on true Virginia Virtual, right? So I think it's important to keep in mind 36% pass rate is not something that people tend to brag about, but it's a lot higher than 14, you know? And the 14 is more in line with what we used to always get. And so then in the fall, which is in January now, but the fall testing window this past year, we had a 91% true Virginia Virtual pass rate versus 13. Notice that 14, 13 is kind of consistent there. And then this past spring wasn't quite as good. And of course, we have small numbers. So one kid failing four tests can really lower our numbers. And one kid passing four tests can really inflate our numbers. But we had a 60% pass rate. Everyone else had 10%. So, I think you can look at numbers and you can make too big of a deal out of them one way or another. But I think there are some definite takeaways here. One is that what we know internally is that we've gotten better at using Virginia Virtual. Our teachers are Virginia Virtual experts. They absolutely understand how it works. They understand how to coach kids. They understand how to support kids. And so we're getting better. So I think that spring 2024 to spring 2025, that's as much as anything. Our teachers know what needs to be done to work in this partnership. Um, I think it's important to keep in mind that every single one of these kids is an outlier. Our alternative ed is definitely the place where people get removed from school. That's not the majority of our students, though. The majority of our students have high anxiety, don't want to be in a traditional school setting. Salem High School is a great place. 1,200 students is just not the best for a lot of students. And so we have kids who just aren't coming to school, and this becomes a safer, calm, quiet environment for them. But all of them are outliers. They're outliers socioeconomically, they're outliers behaviorally, they're outliers in terms of anxiety. I mean, however you look at it. So these are for these students to do this well to us is pretty great. And then there's just no question that if you're on Virginia Virtual, your scores are higher than if they aren't. No question at all. I mentioned earlier that another thing that I noticed before I was in this role is that students alternative ed, often it seemed like became sort of tracked and stuck in alternative ed. And one of the reasons is because the nature of taking the a class that's already, completely asynchronous is you'll have a student who will choose to just sort of work on one class, which makes sense, right? Like work on English, knock it out, then work on math and knock it out, then work on history and knock it out. There's some benefits to that. But what it does is it puts a student very off sync with traditional education. So if mid-year, it might be time for that student to move back into the traditional high school, the in-person high school, that student's like totally off. Like they've already finished their math, but they're, haven't even started their history and now it's halfway through, whatever the scenario might be. And so it's harder to sort of sync up with the traditional high school and then move a kid back that way. Because the nature of Virginia Virtual is that it moves like a traditional school day where a school year where you go day by day, every single class, every single day you do work. Our students are in line with what students are doing at the high school. The fact that this is a CIP school, Virginia Virtual is, while Salem City Schools is CIP, makes it even more aligned with one another. So it's much easier for us to shift a kid back maybe mid-year, maybe at the end of the year. They're going to be more on pace with their peers. So we're really having a lot of fun. I go to the high school for something almost every day. And I love walking in there and seeing students who last year on Virginia Virtual and now they're there in person, doing well at Salem High School and knowing that there's a lot of factors to that. And the biggest one is the human factor. They were loved and cared for here in our program. But also I know that there was an academic component where they actually had a normal school day just virtually while they were in alternative ed. And so we were able to prepare them to move into a normal school day when they moved in person. So we've had great success. It's exciting to see kids have to work hard, to know that they can't just say, oh, I'll just work on this at my own pace, but to say, nope, there's a teacher, there's a program, there's a pace, there's a class. You got to do it. You can't slack off. It allows our teachers here to hold kids to higher expectations. And then in the end, we have more learning and really even beyond, SOL scores, we have kids who feel like they've accomplished something. They've gone to school and they're ready now for the next phase of life, whether that's post high school or moving back in person. So there's my spiel. Like I said, I would love to, if there's going to be questions later on, at some point I'll answer them, but also if I can help anybody out post this webinar, I would love to chat with folks and do whatever I could. So I'll turn it back over to whoever is next.
Thank you, Scott. Really appreciate all the compliments and really appreciate your collaboration with our students. I love the success story at the end. They were in a place where they were loved and cared for, and they had the academic support. And now some of those have the confidence to go back into that 1,200 student building after the great year that they had, or the great semester that they had, and the time that they had with you. Thank you for your 29 years of education with our students in Virginia. I know they all support you, and I bet they see you at the grocery store and they see you at community and at football games and say, Thank you to you, but thank you certainly from the Virginia Virtual Academy and from all of the parents and students you supported over the years. And that's just a concluding slide for, again, for those of you who need to put things into writing, or if this was something you wanted to share with if you're here and you're representing your school and you wanted to share it with your lead or with your assistant principal or principal. Caitlin and I are always happy to come and travel to do presentations at your school meetings, at your leadership meetings, and even at school board meetings. I talked to Amy and Cindy at the beginning of the session today and said what we'd love to do is be able to come back at another time if you'll have us, have some additional test scores to talk about through Salem City, and to talk about a new partnership that we have with a new school division that just started. Caitlin is working with that school division, and I think we're on week 2. So we're setting up a little bit larger set of students than we have with Salem City, and we hope to have some really good similar information with test scores and with just that loved and cared for piece that Scott touched on with this other school division that we're working on. We believe that in the spring would be a really good time if you're hosting webinars at that time. Or even we'd be happy to do a breakout session, Amy, and Cindy, as you're preparing the spring conference in Roanoke. Maybe we could get Scott over there since it's be such a quick trip for him to come from Salem, and maybe we could do, a full presentation or a breakout presentation on what we're doing in the school divisions. I think most schools, as Scott touched on, struggle with the best way to support the alternative ed students. And in this particular setting, we had success. So thank you. Caitlin, I want to be sure there wasn't something else you wanted to share before Cindy and Amy open it up to questions.
The only thing I thought to add as Scott was talking has to do with the inherent nature of Virginia Virtual Academy and the way that we, kind of what Suzanne talked about with VTSS at the beginning, and the way that we are supporting students. That support is for all of our students, right? And so that applies to alternative ed students who, potentially need to have additional remediation sessions, or maybe they need their curriculum modified so that the reading, that the texts in their English course are at a level that is more appropriate for them and to gauge their understanding. And so we have the ability to do that on our end. And speaking to what Suzanne was just talking about with our newest partnership and establishing alternative education, a full, more comprehensive alternative education program with them, that is one of the things that they brought to the table. The very first time I spoke with them was, hey, these kids are behind, right? These are students who are not going to come in and be really successful on a rigorous curriculum. How are you going to support them? And so I think being able to say, look at the success we've had with Salem City, with students who are in similar situations, looking at and thinking about all those wonderful things that Scott said about our Virginia Virtual Academy teachers, they want to support those students. And so not just the additional supports that you have there in person at the Alternative Education Center, if they are in person for that, but also just the things that are inherently part of our program. We are here to support students. We want to meet them where they are. We want them to be successful. And so as they were talking, those were just a couple of things that came to mind that I wanted to be sure to mention before we opened it up to questions.
Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you, Scott. I want to also thank Curtis Hicks, Superintendent of Salem City Schools, for believing in me when I came to sit down and talk to you about programs 3 years ago that you didn't go, wait, what is this? And tell me to leave the conference room. I appreciate you listening and thinking about it. And Curtis is a thoughtful person on ideas and has to ponder them. And then he comes back with lots of questions, Scott, as you probably know, working with him for all of these years. So thank you to Superintendent Hicks and for the office staff who works with us on a daily basis. There are Salem City students who are doing the traditional Virginia Virtual Academy, the true VAVA, I guess as Scott refers to it, where they are actually working at home with our full-time at home with our teachers and with a learning a caring adult in the home. So thank you, Curtis. Appreciate that in all of Salem City. So we're happy to take any questions if people are, I don't know if people are typing, Amy and Cindy, or if people are.
Either way, whatever. I think the group we have a good enough group where they can come off mute and ask questions, or if they're more comfortable putting them in chat, we'll monitor that too. So this is a great time. You got some time to ask these 3 experts questions when it comes to alternative settings and virtual
Feel free
learning.
to ask
I do have a
questions of
question.
anybody. Oh, good. Somebody has a question. Great.
Right. So how would you define the relationship between Salem City and Virginia Virtual? So like in other words, are y'all in like a partnership? Do the students get unenrolled from Salem City School to enroll into Virginia Virtual? Is it like a MOU are y'all under, or is it some sort of contract? Like what is the like logistics behind that relationship?
Sure. Thank you. Great question. And so you could start with me if your school division, Suzanne Sloan, and that's just ssloan at k12.com. If you were thinking about entering into a partnership, we have various levels of partnership that we do with different school divisions. But yes, Salem City 3 years ago signed a partnership with us in order to enroll students within their school division who were either excelled during the COVID pandemic time and they wanted to stay on the virtual setting but moved over to our system. There are students that Salem City supports that live outside the school division, so those students can attend as well through the partnership and through Virginia code that allows that for MOPS, which are multi-division online providers. All of this is on the Virginia Department of Education website. If you wanted to just type in MOP, that might be helpful for you to just read what is a multi-division online provider. That a bill passed into law in 2010, allowing partners to come in, form contract and partnerships with school divisions, and then under great scrutiny and great reporting requirements from the Virginia Department of Education, we have to turn in reports just as a traditional school does. And so Salem City is one of our partners. Then when we decided, and this was Curtis Hicks and his team at Salem City decided they wanted to use this program for the alternative ed setting, then we just continued. These students who Scott is speaking of that are coming over to the building, the Ames building, and working with his staff and our staff are Salem City students. And so they are their own school division. They're not listed in a different way in, let's say, Power School or in the school reporting. They're listed as Salem City students. And our Virginia Virtual Academy teachers come in through the online setting and work with the students. And they're all Virginia certified, and they are K-12 employees. So that's the partnership. Hopefully that's helpful on a high level of how the partnership works.
It's a great question. Other questions? We have a quiet group.
So again, we would be happy to come and speak at any kind of a leadership meeting, or let's say you traditionally in the fall or in the spring have bring your academic team together, or even if you had a board member or two who were interested in having a conversation. We attend the VSBA conferences as well with a smaller group that attends over there and talks to school board members. So we'd be happy to come to your school and talk about it. If your superintendent is interested in a partnership, again, feel free to reach out to me, Suzanne Sloan, ssloan at k12.com. And I think that's all in what Amy and Cindy send over. If you're interested in how the virtual and alternative setting goes, I'm sure Caitlin would be happy to share her email. And Scott, thank you for saying that you would talk to people who are thinking about doing this as well.
Yeah, and sometimes people ask about when they hear about someone else is doing something about a site visit. That's possible. I don't think you'd see a whole lot. Like you'd walk in and watch it, see kids on a computer doing work. So, but what you could benefit from potentially are folks in your school division who are working in alternative ed to talking with me, but also with our teachers here. I mean, they literally are just experts at how to manage and support and coach students who are on Virginia Virtual. So, if you're thinking to yourself, well, if our alternative ed building tried this, what would this actually look like? Like, what would our teachers have to do, or the people who are in that building do? We could definitely talk with you, and I could give you a lot of ideas, but really, our teachers here would be even significantly better than I would at that. So, that's not to say you couldn't come visit us, but it's really not super exciting to watch kids in class.
I will ask another question. So this question's more for Scott. So, Scott, I do, like, we have similar jobs. We don't have the exact same job. I'm down here. I'm in Mecklenburg County. And so we've been doing the alternative school, and we've had multiple rebrands of the alternative school over the past few years. And I'm just curious, I think you kind of hit on it, but I'm going to ask the question anyway so it can sink into my brain. What what is making your students do better with Virginia Virtual over any of the other numerous? Is it the live instructions? I mean, one of the notes I wrote down is you said that they have a normal schedule, so they're expected to be in class. They're not creating their own um, timeline because it's just log in, do the work, log back out, which is what we use with our current online program. Do you think that's what it is, like having that engagement with an actual teacher? Because I'm assuming that this like the kids can actually like raise their hand in the class and ask the teacher a question on Virginia Virtual, which is obviously something they can't do on some of these other online platforms. Do you
Yeah.
think that's what made the difference? Because we struggle with kids being successful in their online classes.
Right.
Um,
Right.
in the long run, sometimes we can have a good first 9 weeks, and then
Yeah.
it's a struggle after that, especially for kids who are home based, or long term suspended or expelled, and we're offering these services to them. So I
Yeah.
just was curious if that's really the simple answer. It's the live teachers, or if there's something else
All
that
right.
you
Good.
noticed.
Yeah, that's a good question. First of all, tell Scott Warner hi.
Okay, I will.
Um, he was my high school assistant principal, like
Oh.
when I was a student in high school. So that shows you how old he is.
We already know, and everybody seems to know him. So it's
Yeah.
not surprising that somebody in this meeting would know him.
Yeah. I love Scott Warner. He's a good man. So to answer your question, kinda, I think that doesn't hurt to have a lot actual teachers. But our students are hesitant to take advantage of that the way they really ought to, right? So, like, if you're really doing Virginia Virtual to its best, you are absolutely engaging with those teachers. You are visiting them in office hours. You are responding to activities in the live class session, the class connects that happen. So, the potential is there for that, and occasionally that is definitely something our students have taken advantage of. Our students, however, like the ones you described, they didn't really take advantage of that, many of them when they were in person, and they are really not. I think online requires another level of really self-motivation to truly be successful if you're just out there on an online environment because you're not in a class with a teacher tapping you on the shoulder saying, pay attention right now on a daily basis. So I don't think that's been the primary reason. I think the fact that they create their own lessons is part of it. I think the lessons that they're creating, the activities they're creating, the work they're creating is very well aligned with state standards. Whereas if you purchase from a third provider a class in a can, it is, but it's not the same as when you have an individual teacher who's then saying, "Oh, they're still not getting this. Let me make a new assignment," right? Like a class in a can completely ignores a student's the assessment feedback that the teacher would get to determine what comes next. So these teachers can say, "Oh, wait, we're not ready to move on. We've got to stop and do something else." So I think the instruction and the pace of it and the alignment with standards is more beneficial than the teacher and the students themselves because our students tend to not want to pay attention in the class connects or really get involved. Not all of them, but most of them. But beyond that, I think it's the fact that it creates a sense of normalcy about going to school that like our kids need routine and they need to experience school. I don't think school's perfect the way it is, but like the general gist of like I go to school today, I go to school tomorrow, I go to school the next day. Today I had math, tomorrow I had math, the next day I had math, or maybe you're on an AB day or whatever. But so the idea is that like there's a routine and a flow to school. It creates this normalcy that our kids need. Their brains are too young, not developed. They can't handle just sort of the openness of, oh, I'll just work on class when I want to work on a class. And so what happens is it feels more normal. And then our teachers, because there is something you have to do every day, and there's somebody out there making deadlines and assignments, our teachers are able to say, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. Whereas if it's just class in a can, at your own pace, it's a little bit harder to say you got to do this. I realize you can set deadlines and those types of programs have that, but it's not the same because in the end, a kid could sort of do it all next week and then take a week off and do another class. So I think it's more that sense of normalcy of what school should feel like allows everybody to sort of have higher expectations for students.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other questions for this group? I know some of you have just come on, so after this is over, after the webinar, I will send out the slide deck and a recording so you can go back and listen to what you might have missed. So, but any other questions?
I put my contact information in there. If anybody else wants to, feel free, or you can just reach out through me if you come up with some other things. And again, we'll certainly be at VAS. If your superintendent or others are going, maybe you could ask if you could go too. If you wanted to come and see some of the great things that happen there. Sometimes they're able to bring somebody else with them or send someone with them.
Okay, if there's no further questions, I would just want to thank Suzanne and Scott and Caitlin for partnering us with us on this webinar, and we look forward to working with you all throughout the year. And thank those of you that attended this webinar today. We know how busy you are, but we appreciate you spending time with us.